This is the web transcription service of the Royal Canadian Military Institute, welcoming you to our transcript series of Spring 2012 events. In today's podcast, we present the Security Studies Committee luncheon of May the 15th, 2012, given by Dr. Howard Coombs of the Canadian Forces College. Dr. Coombs is speaking on Leadership in a Changing Environment, Afghanistan 2004 and 2010-2011.
This is ISAF headquarters. ISAF in 2004 was really just central Afghanistan, Kabul, and they just started ISAF enlargement when I was there, so they were starting to take control of northern Afghanistan from Coalition Forces Command Afghanistan, which was the joint British-American command that was responsible for security as part of Operation Enduring Freedom. Next slide, please. That was the mission for ISAF 5, which was International Security Assistance Forces 5, which was General Hillier's headquarters. A very straightforward mission. It was focused on a secure environment. Broad, but had a military focus. General Hillier actually enlarged beyond that mission and started moving into civil military affairs, assisting the government, assisting the Afghan Transitional Authority, which was President Karzai, and his interim administration before they were elected in 2004 after the first set of elections. General Hillier was ordered formally to desist from any activity that was non-military in nature. So that would include capacity building within the government, which he actually focused on. In order to deal with that prohibition, he brought over 2 Canadian officers. Myself, I was in reserves at the time, so I was brought over. He never truly retired. And actually, my wife took the phone call to the house, so that's another story. I'll tell you about that after. I went to Afghanistan with Lieutenant Colonel Ian Hope, who some of you may know the name. He commanded Task Force Orion in 2006, the 1st Canadian Battalion into Canada. And we worked with the Afghan government to work on capacity building. The problem as they saw it in 2004 was they were getting, I think, if my memory serves me correct, about $5 billion over a 2-year period. They saw it flowing into the government, but they had no capacity to focus and spend that money. And they didn't have a concept that could deal with that kind of influx of capital. So General Hillier lent us, because we were Canadian officers working for him as the Canadian Army commander at the time, to the Karzai government. Therefore, he wasn't violating, in his mind, the prohibition that NATO had laid on him not to become involved in non-military affairs. If you talk to him today, he'll probably put it more eloquently, but you'll still be left with a feeling that there's a used car on the lot right now for sale. Next slide, please. What we did was we worked on a concept using Afghan ideas to capture what they had to do, or thought they had to do with the money to spend in a focused, efficient, prudent, and accountable manner. Some could say today that we might not have been truly successful in all those parts. However, what we did realize that there was a whole bunch of players, and I put them over on the right-hand side of the slide, from the international community, Afghan Transitional Authority, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, Coalition Forces Command Afghanistan, donors, and, of course, ISAF. And all of them had to believe in the same, or see the same concept and end state, or goals, in order to harmonize this and use this concept, which later became the underpinnings of the Afghan National Development Strategy, which actually has funded some of the more successful programs in Afghanistan, such as the Ministry of Rural Reconstruction and Development. But everybody had to buy into this. We had to create shared ownership of the idea. We had to create actualization of it. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to net this all together. Next slide, please. That's the original slide that I offered to General Hillier as a potential way ahead in order to get folks on side. And for those that are familiar with the concepts of military planning, this was our start state, which was the strategic concept. Our end state or goal was creation of shared vision. We had 3 lines of operation, or thrust lines: the Afghan Transitional Authority, the international community, and the military communities. And each one had a number of decisive points or folks or steps along the road that we had to take. This doesn't really capture the reality of the myriad of contracts and connections between all those different groups and people, but it was a representation of what we had to try to do to move from who we were to creating shared ownership and shared vision of a concept for focused regional development under Afghan-led ministries. And General Hillier spent a lot of time with myself and Ian And he opened the door in a lot of these organizations for us, and he convinced some of these folks, if we couldn't, that this was a good idea. He used his personnel, he used his office, and he used every trick that a smooth-talking Newfoundlander can say in the book to get them on side. And he is quite good for those who have had a chance to listen to him. And he brought a lot of these folks on side, so that in the end, the Afghan National Development Strategy did move through, and most international organizations and other agencies bought into it. Next slide, please. So, I went from 2004, I was working at the strategic level with the Afghan government, to the tactical level with Task Force Kandahar in 2010, 2011. And moved from thinking about all of Afghanistan to reality was we had started with 3 districts. Kandahar City is right there, Dand, Daman, and Panjwai. We worked with 2 Afghan leaders, both talented, Haji Fazlul Naga, Haji Amadullah Nazak. Nazak is still the district governor of Dand. He was just in Washington with the Young Politicians of America program. And unfortunately, Haji Fazlul Naga was killed by a vehicle-borne IED in January with one of his sons, 6-year-old. Yeah. He was both very different men in experience. Aga was a Mujahideen front commander from the Soviet era, and he commanded great respect, great suasion based on the fact that he had been a Mujahideen, member of the Mujahideen commander. As well, he was a Saeed. He's a direct descendant from the line of Muhammad. And Nazak, very young man, early 30s, insatiable curiosity about the world. He has a Facebook site if anybody wants to be his friend on Facebook. He was trying to get internet set up in his district so he could connect to the young people in his district. So both very charismatic, but both very different. The face of Afghanistan. Next slide, please. This was our mission statement. Very different mission statement than 2004. Very detailed. And also recognizing the things that Sarkisian and Sewell talked about at the beginning of my presentation, that the fact is, in order to defeat the insurgency, we had to work across different areas, such as development and governance. It acknowledged the military had a role to play in this. And we had full support of the Canadian government to do it. And NATO expected those kinds of things at that time, 7 years later. I will also mention this time that we lost responsibility for Daman after our mission started, so we were focused. Our whole task force, which comprised well over 2,000 people, and it doubled up to almost 5,000, was focused on 2 districts. A far cry from 2006 when we had battles running around several provinces. Next slide, please. And these are the types of things that we looked at across these thrust lines or lines of operations in these different areas. The one thing that we learned over time, and we saw as Canadians, we saw in southern Afghanistan, is insurgency has 2 components. You have to not just defeat the insurgent, but as I mentioned before, defeat the insurgency. Defeating the insurgent is fairly simple. We kill them, or we deter them from picking up arms by killing their leaders, or we make it very difficult for them to transit areas. All kinds of things. And to be honest with you, Canadians became very good at that in southern Afghanistan. However, that doesn't defeat the insurgency. And to defeat the insurgency, you have to take away the root causes of dissatisfaction that generate the support for the insurgent. And these are the types of things that were more important to us at times than killing the insurgents. We focused in terms of security on developing capacities and along with the violence part of the combat operation. In terms of governance, we were working on building capacity at the district level, linking it to provincial governance, and helping strengthen those structures and link it back to CAL, to national structures. And in terms of development, we were trying to provide security and allowing sustainable programs and policies of development supported by organizations like CEDA or preferably the Afghan government to exist and flourish in these areas after we had fought through. Next slide, please. And for General Milner, who spent more of his time working with other agencies and other entities than at times leading his task force, his military part of his task force, this slide was very important because it captured what I call the paradoxical trinity of contemporary warfare. Development, security, and governance, none of which can exist without the other, and it is a triangle in the end that all the apexes have to be somewhat in balance. Otherwise, it becomes counterbalance. And I can start talking about phosphorus now, but Acton would probably throw me out of the room. He does buy me beer to keep me quiet when I talk about phosphorus. The one thing that we found were key, and it shocked the heck right out of me, was the amount of suasion that senior military commanders had to exert through moral authority and personality, not by position, not by legal or de jure authority. Next slide, please. So, what I have come to the conclusion, there's a number of things that I found very useful to senior commanders in these types of environments. And it came down to me, it's all about networks. It's more about social networks than it is about technological networks. And I'll say that up front. We put a lot of emphasis today in technology, but this is why leadership and management of people has not changed. It's all about face-to-face social interaction. And that's how you create consensus, common intent, and shared understanding. Next slide, please. The goal for every military commander is always this: common intent and shared understanding. That way you get all the cats moving in the same direction to the right objectives. That takes a lot of work, and it's more than just computer systems to do that. Interoperability is not determined by technology. And we will even say in the alliance, we had RC, Acton can speak to this if anybody asks him, RC South Headquarters, Royal Command South Headquarters based on 10th Mountain Division, could not talk to us. We did not have the same technological systems, computer systems, that they had. We had 2 terminals for their secure system in our headquarters. 2 terminals. Many of you have more than 2 computers in your whole house. That kind of limited connectivity between allies who wear uniforms and fight together is magnified thousands of times when you talk about working with private contractors, civilian agencies, multinational corporations. So it has to be face-to-face. It has to be social. It has to be based on trust. This is my university gobbledygook thing, but what it actually says is that what I found was fascinating was that people jump whole levels in what we call the levels of war. So strategic, operational, and tactical, that's on military abuse conflict, and they all have different headquarters at every level, right, that correspond all the way up to national authorities at the strategic level. In a civilian agency, the civilian field work for United Nations High Commission on Refugees may be the next level in his chain of command, may be Brussels, or it could be New York. So when you're dealing with that 23-year-old field worker, you have to understand where he fits in the whole environment, or she fits. And it's important you get grip on that, because if you don't understand that, you can't effectively deal with them because you have no idea how they're interacting with others in your environment. And it's worth the time up front in the mission to try to figure all that stuff out. If you can spend time with these folks of all agencies and get them on side and create shared understanding and intent, they tend to work in a similar fashion to achieve, if not the same, at least commensurate goals as you. So even when you're not dealing with them, they're moving in the same direction you are. So you achieve a unity of effect, which is incredibly important. Next slide, please. Once you create a common understanding and shared intent, while you can't automatically reach out and touch somebody all the time because you don't have a straight line to them by radio or computer, as long as they're thinking that way, you are still moving faster than your opponents. Those people who would take away from the things that you are doing. And when we talk about insurgency, in our snapshot of Southern Afghanistan, the insurgency wasn't monolithic. The insurgency was, comprised of many different folks. From people who were Taliban, as we call them, from people who had criminal business activities, from folks running in the illicit economy, to opium farmers or folks who were protecting their livelihood, and people who just didn't like us. We lumped them together as the insurgency, but they had no unity of command and no common sense of where they were going, except to try to deter us at times. What I found is the social interaction was key, followed by cell phones to pass information, and of course the internet, not the intranet. One thing I found useful was in the virtual world, you can create meeting places on the web, unclassified web, where people can get together and log in and exchange ideas. I've watched the civilian agencies do that very effectively, and not so much the military because we have all kinds of prohibitions about logging onto the internet and discussion. But watching the Kandahar Provincial Reconstruction Team, they established a thing called Harmony Web, which allowed all kinds of civilians to log in and exchange ideas. I thought it was brilliant, nothing new. But some of us participated in that, but we had to be very careful because of the systems. Success is effects-based. If you can't show people success while you're doing all this, they leave the alliance. They leave your coalition. Because it's just like, it's like a business. If you can't show a profit, people go elsewhere. Same as this. If you can't show people that you're going to be successful, some kind of success, and let them take ownership of it, more importantly, they will abandon the social network that you set up. And last, and most importantly, Paul, personality and emotional intelligence is crucial. It's ideologic. Paul was my brigade commander at one point, so you know what? He has a great touch with people, and those commanders in Afghanistan were really good with folks. One thing I do know is if you're not good with people, find somebody who is good and let them act as your front man, because you need to get folks on side. Next slide, please. And this last quote is from Major General Michael Flynn, who is an American intelligence officer, and he wrote a scathing account of U.S. intelligence, of the failure of U.S. intelligence prior to the invasion of Iraq. But this is his article where he's talking about the fact is it's about teams of teams. People coming together as a group and being much stronger than the composite parts of the individuals. Last slide, please. I think that's it. And I've given a longer version to Eric, so there's two versions, a short and long, and if you'd like to keep it or use the slides for something, feel free. And on that note, thank you for having me here today.
Gentlemen, we have time for questions. And again, may I introduce Colonel Ackman Kilby, who is sitting immediately to Dr. Coombs' left, who is willing to be a target for any shots directed.
Well, I guess sort of two things came up I was thinking about. See, we often have in the conventional military sort of, the technocratic frame for promotion. But at the same time, what you're striving is what you really need the human experience that comes out of commanding a platoon, commanding a company, commanding a battalion. That's because that is really the best school for learning these things that are so important. And I guess, though, the other side of things, though, is that you think about some of the great 19th century endeavors in this, like Gordon in the Sudan before the Mahdi, or Lawrence in India and so on. And sometimes it strikes me that the best thing to do is to get the guy who has all these qualities, is really expert on the local area, and leave him there. Where we tend to think also in terms of personnel requirements and promotion streams, and we get someone who's doing a good job, but they can only stay a year, and we yank them out and put someone else in to start all over again.
Yes. I agree with you 100%. And that's one of the reasons that headquarters deployments are now 9 months or longer. Our deployment was 11 months as a headquarters, which was up from the 6 months previously. And I know our American brothers and sisters tend to leave senior commanders in place now, as long as they're effective. I don't think there's any plans to lengthen our deployments more so than they are right now for headquarters, but the combat units still rotate at the rate of about every 6 months-ish.
Howard, sorry, Eric, am I on the line? Howard, you talked about how commander at the senior level need to be people, social people who can communicate with the lowest levels and the highest levels, and know how to conduct themselves in those different scenarios. I come from, I came through the ranks, and I saw a brigadier and I saw a division commander, and typically he was somebody in the distance, and he never really got to know him. You might see him on the corner and, as the brigade drove by or something. So the new commanders, these new senior leaders, they need to be everything to everybody. Otherwise, they're not going to be successful. Is the command changing? Is my perception that old? I mean, I haven't.
No, I think you're right, and that's where I qualified it by saying if the individual is not able to do that, they have to find somebody who can. Sure. Because the reality is, when you engage with non-military organizations, if you can't do it on a personal level, you'll have a hard time getting their support. And you're soliciting support. You can't command support. And I found it very interesting because we have this clash of cultures on a regular basis in Task Force Kandahar. Brigadier General Dean Miller is a super guy, armor officer. He's very type A, personality oriented, and it's about, attack, attack, attack. Get to where you need to go, do it now with the most violence possible. Dealing with civilian agencies for him was like slow death. And so we worked with the ROC, the representative of Canada in Kandahar, Mr. Tim Martin, who's now the ambassador in Colombia, a great man. And I can remember sitting in on meetings between he and General Milner, and Ambassador Martin would say, okay, well, thank you very much for that, Dean. I understand what you want to do. I will talk about that with my colleagues. And Dean would go, no, you don't understand. This needs to happen now. I do understand, Dean. I will talk about this with my colleagues, and I'll see if they will be supportive of this idea. And this is all within Canadian agencies. And finally he said, okay, I got it. Yes, Tim, no problem. I'll listen. I'll wait. But that was just with us. So the short answer is, the commanders have to be able to connect. And if they can't, they're not effective in this environment. They're great combat leaders. But in this type of war or this type of conflict, it's more than just combat operations.
Further questions? You've answered them all, Howard.
For the web transcription service of the RCMI, this is Eric Morse saying goodbye and thank you for listening. Podcasts of other RCMI lectures in the 2012 season are also available on the website now, so please join us again soon.